this week, one of our presentations is looking at the WP1 Assignment draft process a little bit, recapping some things that we talked about in the previous unit about the assignment. Okay, so we're going to talk a little more about how to get some of these text moves on. So just as a reminder, college level personal narrative isn't just a simple summary of an experience. Okay, you're not just reporting. You're not a reporter. You're not going to just report what happened and then be like, okay, thank you, the end. You're going to have to go a little deeper, and it's also not like your typical academic 3-point essay. You know, if you get stuck in that structure, we're taught that a lot, and it works great for certain essays, right? You have an intro, point 1, point 2, point 3, conclusion. But if you try to force your personal narrative into that template, it's not gonna quite be there. Okay, so keep your mind open about how many paragraphs you might have. 8 paragraphs. You might have 20 paragraphs. Some of the paragraphs might be really tiny because you have dialogue, and you got to kind of open your mind up about the purpose of your assignment, right? So college level means we're doing a little bit of higher level writing. So this narrative, should be at that level, which is rich, engaging, dynamic, meaningful. So these are the things that result from, putting enough attention into thinking about your rhetorical situation, thinking critically about it, that will be reflected in how engaged your audience is. So I know that feels like a big challenge to some of you, but you can do it. You just have to be open, not just to your topic and the possibilities, but you also have to be open to the revising process. Okay, if you're one of those people who's like, nope, I'm giving this one shot, and if I don't get it right the first time, that's it. You're gonna have to kind of approach it a little differently and think about, what, I might have to write this, completely over again. And we'll talk more about revision, but there's a little more to it than just editing for commas and things along those lines. Okay, but you can do it. You just, have a little confidence. So the WP1 assignment, just to remind you of the prompt, put it here again. I know I'm repeating myself a little bit in this presentation, but I think it's a good thing though. Write a narrative sharing your personal experience and offering insight into its meaning. The goal is to tell an interesting story that leaves your readers with insight they can relate to their own lives, right? So I put some of the basic requirements here, which are MLA format, and that's just talking about how it looks on the page. We're not using sources for this essay, right? So you don't have to worry about citations or anything like that. And I have another presentation that focuses on MLA format. The length, I always get questions about length. I hate giving word counts for things. I do it though because on some assignments like journals, because I want you to have a target, or so this time I'm going to kind of give you a page range that I think is enough space for you to meet what's expected for this assignment. If you just try to, if you just write a page and a half, it's just not going to cut it. You're not going to have enough development. You're not going to have enough room for detail or scene or dialogue and all those things you need to kind of, those elements that need to be in your narrative. So that's my recommended page range. And again, I put these topics from your chapter 4 here to help, some of you have already picked your topics because that's kind of what the goal was from the last unit. And some of you might still be unsure. You might be going, I have a topic, but I don't feel good about it. And you're kind of hemming and hawing about it. That's normal. But think about your topic still this week, because the writing process, it's not that linear. A lot of times you start writing or drafting and then you're like, this topic is not, and you have to start over and go back to the pre-writing process. So don't forget what your topic options are. you might still have to be thinking about that this week. Okay, so these 2 slides are just to remind you, these are screenshots from our book to remind you what you might need to think about still this week. And again, I know I said this in my last presentation, but I always say it because I don't think some of us understand, what it's like to write about hard experiences. So just a reminder to think twice about writing about, traumatic experiences, because I do expect you to use scenes in detail and go into those moments that are difficult. So if you don't want to do that, then don't write about something that's traumatic. Okay, that could cause you some kind of distress or PTSD. It happens. So just a little heads up again about writing about difficult experiences. So this is one of the things I want to emphasize, the scope of your experience, because when I look through your topics and see you guys writing about them, what I think is some of them are on point and some of them are a little bit too broad, which we'll talk about. So you got to remember we're doing a small essay. I mean, an essay means a small writing or a brief writing. It's not a book. So you can't fit everything into your story. You can't talk about a huge experience in this tiny little essay because you're not going to have the ability to get into those close-up moments that you need to engage readers. So just a reminder to make sure your topic is focused on an experience and not lots of experiences. Okay, too many, that's, like I said, you're not going to have room to engage readers. You need a linear plot. You need some kind of conflict or tension or a climax. It's got to have a kind of a story shape, and you got to have some detail or some things in there that the readers can kind of bite into, right? Just if you're getting overwhelmed on, well, how can I tell the story but I want to talk about, the bigger part of my life, they're going to need to know that. Okay, well, you can use other techniques. You can open with a paragraph of backstory, or you can maybe use little short flashback in there, here and there, if you need to kind of touch on the greater part of your life experience. So there are ways you can do it. So I gave you guys some topics here to give you an example of what I think is a good narrow experience for an essay versus what's too broad. Okay, so these are just some examples. I either made up or they're actually my real experiences. So like if you're thinking about, I want to write about what it's like to be a parent. Okay, well, that's really big, right? I mean, being a parent, that's a huge thing. So that's not really an experience. I mean, it is, but it's a bazillion experiences. So you have to narrow in on something. So here's an example: the experience of finding drugs in my son's room and realizing he had a serious problem. Okay, so that's something you can manage in a 3 to 5 page essay, right? You want to talk about, your family drama, because there's a lot of good conflict and tension in there, right? We all have those moments, those experiences. So instead of, going big and being like my family drama, get narrow and focus on what's your experience. The experience of realizing my liberal parents weren't as open-minded as I thought. So that's something, right? That if you were going to look at, there's actually something I can zero in on and tell a story, something that happened, okay? The time when my poetry professor chased me down a hallway after class to encourage me to become a writer and became my mentor, okay? So that's a lot more focused in on an experience. And I used the time when for that one. So if you want to check yourself on your topic, try to put it in that frame, the experience of or the time when, and see if it fits in that narrow spot and not just why I became a writer, right? That's big. That could be like a million reasons. Instead of just talking about grief, okay, well, that could, again, that's very complex. There there's a lot of stuff in there. You could have multiple experiences with grief. So what do you mean? Okay, the time I had a vivid dream about my friend who passed away, and it made me realize it was time to move on with my life. Wow, that's specific. I can tell that story. I could tell that story in 3 to 5 pages, right? Instead of, now this one's this is more narrow than some of the others that above it, but my summer working at gun shows. Okay, well, that's still, even though it's a summer, that's still a big chunk of time. So how are you gonna, that's a lot of different experiences. But if you focus on a single experience, or a few, really narrowed experiences, how my experience working gun shows in South Texas gave me a different perspective on gun enthusiasts and gun ownership. Okay, so you can kind of see the examples here of what I'm talking about in terms of, you don't want to chew off too big, too broad of a scope for your essay. So think not just about the topic, but also the time frame, okay? And again, to remind you, you can't forget, you got to think about the rhetorical situation when you're interpreting your experiences. I just put this here to remind you some of the questions you're thinking about this relationship between you, writer, your audience, and your text, okay? So who's your audience? What do you need to put in the story for them? How does your voice sound? What text moves are you going to make? All that stuff is connected. Don't forget that relationship. So the key question, of course, is how can you connect your experience with the lives, interests, and concerns of other people? How do you do that? Well, guess what? Part of it is just going to happen because you're sharing your experience. And humans, by nature, want to, connect with you and read your story and try to understand what's going on. So you can also develop your voice. When you're doing that as a writer, that's gonna be one of the things that connects you to your audience. So think about your voice and how it's going to be in how it's going to sound to your readers. And of course, the text moves you choose to use to engage readers, that's going to help connect, right? Because you have to remember that the goal is really to engage the audience. That's one of the major goals. So how are you going to do that? Your readers want to experience your experience with you. I want to feel like I'm there. Okay, I want to see what you see. I want to understand your thoughts. You might have to go closer in and really describe your thoughts in that moment, or retell what was said in a piece of dialogue or something. That's what I mean by your audience wants to experience your experience with you. So for text moves, here's some things you can look at. And these are some of the things listed in your chapter 4. Time and place, you always have to think about that and establish this early in the narrative, because we want to know the when and where. Those are the basics. Okay, where are we in the story? Where are we in place, setting? I guess you can kind of think of it if you want to go into the story comparison. And again, you can always use backstory if you feel your reader needs more context for time and place. So don't forget to think about that in your text moves. Now, the story structure, putting your story, structuring it around a central conflict. If you go back to those examples I gave you, you can probably pinpoint some kind of central conflict in those examples, right? So what is your central conflict? That's a question you want to ask yourself. So think about your topics and how you think your story is centered around that conflict. But conflicts, again, can be different things: internal, external. They come in varying degrees of tension. They don't have to be, it's not like, they're not always nuclear, right? There's a lot going on. There's a lot of degrees. And I put this little, like when I teach literature, I use this chart to kind of think about story structure. And usually, there's some rising action, a little bit of exposition at the beginning to set us up, right? Main moment of greatest tension or climax, and then your resolution, or in your case, it would be insight. Okay. And just remember, a conflict just means, from a story point of view, a character wants something and can't have it, right? So again, it doesn't have to be a big, huge thing. Conflict can come in varying degrees. So think about your conflict, think about your story structure. Another text move that's going to be, I think, pretty effective is zooming in for close-ups. That's the way your book puts it. And what they're talking about is a lot of times we just get caught up in the this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. We're just blowing through the story without slowing down a little bit for important moments. You can't tell everything in detail because, like I said, that would be like a billion pages. But you can slow the pace of the narrative and zoom in on important moments. How do you know what the important moments are? Well, you're going to know because you're going to be the expert of your own story. But they're going to be those moments where something matters, something is important, something is happening that's big, or there's some realization, or there's some conflict or moment of tension. And to do this, you're going to have to show and not just tell. So like I said, instead of blowing through the plot points, show some of that story. Show it in a close-up. Create scenes for the moments in the experience. How do you create scenes? Well, you slow it down. You go in a little deeper. You use dialogue to show. You don't want to use needless dialogue. Needless dialogue would be something like, I said, hey, what? And she said, all right, okay. Just stuff that has no substance to it. It doesn't move the story forward in any way. If you want to look at examples of dialogue, go back and review the story Driving Away again, because that writer used it very effectively. Other text moves, these, using details, description can really help make your story come alive, okay? So, of course, description means, describing what the experience is like, but in a very vivid, concrete way. So using details that are concrete and memorable, that's important. Use some adjectives here and there. Tell me what something sounded like, looked like, you can't do that the whole way through every little paragraph, but you can do it in places where it makes sense to do so. If you're writing about conflict with your mother, you might have a moment where you kind of describe her, so we can kind of get a sense of who she is, right? So don't forget to use your details and descriptions. Figurative language is another way. Using similes, metaphors. You're not writing a poem, but figurative language can also be very useful in kind of helping your audience feel like they are there with you. Have to comment on the ethic angle of this. We are writing about our personal stories. When we do get to the workshop portion of it, where we're sharing with each other, please keep in mind that in this type of class, it's unethical for you to go share people's stories without their permission. So please don't share things outside of the class or let others read anybody else's stories. Even though we're all separated and far apart, it's still, you just got to be cautious with that. It's the right thing to do. And on that same line, don't write anything that you would regret sharing with other people, okay? So like I said earlier, you may already feel like, hey, I got my topic, I did my pre-writing, I'm ready to roll. Some of you already have a draft because I've talked to a few of you. Some of you have 2 drafts of 2 different topics because you couldn't choose. So whatever wherever you are in the writing process, I think it's still early enough that you might come back to the planning or pre-writing or take it another level. So I put a little list here of things you can do to kind of help you get more ideas, okay? So some of these, free writing, we've done that. You can talk about your ideas with other people, ask yourself questions about the rhetorical. We're kind of doing some of those already. But something you might do, for example, is create a storyboard or, write a key scene. And so in my face-to-face classes, I've actually spent some time with students having them write a storyboard. It's not easy for everybody to draw, especially if you're not a great artist like me. But even stick figure drawings, I think, can kind of help us get our story figured out. So these are just some considerations for you. And some other things to think about are, sometimes you just have to jump in there and start writing. And remember what Anne Lamott said, very few writers really know what they are doing until they've done it. Most of us don't know where we're going when we write. You have an idea. You're like, okay, I know I'm going to tell this story, and I know kind of what I want my readers to take away. You might have a general idea, but you don't really know for sure. Sometimes there's, turns and corners and things you don't anticipate coming. But also keep in mind, it's easy to get frustrated when the words, don't come out magically and you feel frustrated. And that's normal. Feeling lost, not sure where you're going, not having great confidence, that's normal. Try to push past those feelings if you can, and get past all those insecurities, and just try to get your draft started. You can start in different ways. Like I said, you can go back to the pre-writing process and kind of create a storyboard. You can, if you don't like the storyboard thing, you can also do like a plot point list. Just kind of list the different, this happened and this happened list, so you can make sure you have what you need in there. Just if maybe you don't want to start at the beginning, so just start writing a scene that includes dialogue from one of your most tense moments in your story. Consult your free writing exercises that you already did and maybe build those out a little more. That's another place you can start. Just start with the part of the story you're like, oh, I can't wait to get to this part, and write that down, and then you can build the rest of the story around it. You don't have to start at the beginning when you're drafting. Okay, you can start anywhere. If for those of you who are like, no, I would like to start at the beginning because that's how it works, write a hook for the first line. Try to write a sentence that is so interesting, like I'm just going to want to jump right in. So try to write a hook. Imagine it like a curtain opens, what's taking place. Just jump into the action, right? Don't give me like paragraphs of setup. Just jump in. One day this happened, and then tell me the story, or something along those lines where you just kind of hit us with, we're in the story, boom. That's actually a good strategy. Or you can just start with backstory, start with the context, write a piece, a paragraph about what you think we need to know for this story. And if you want an example, go back to the essay, My 8-Cal Bracelet. She does that really well in that essay. So these are just some ideas. If you're kind of getting the writer block feeling, you want to just bust through that, ways you can get started. So just as a reminder, what we're doing, we're submitting the first draft this week. Next week, we'll do the self-eval and writing workshop. I'm still trying to figure that process out a little bit for the writing workshop. Then we'll be revising and rethinking and re-seeing, and I'll have a whole new lesson for you on that. You'll be thinking about how you want to change it, revise it, and then resubmit it. That's when you'll get the grade on the essay. Okay. So if you have questions about how to get your draft done, if you need help with anything, you know how to reach me. So don't hesitate to do so. I'm here to guide you. I'm here to, push you a little bit if you need a little push, or you just want some feedback. Okay. So reach out if you need anything. Thanks, guys.